You are here on purpose with a purpose by design. Hello and welcome back to Purpose by Design. You are here on purpose with a purpose by design, not by default. I am Dr. Pamela Hinkle, and I am so thankful and grateful that you're here. And we are continuing in our amazing series, Wholeness and Health on Purpose. What a concept to think that you can choose wholeness and health, that you have a voice in this and something to say. This is what we're studying. God is bringing in all kinds of amazing experts from all over the place to talk about certain aspects of wholeness and health on purpose and how to choose it. And today is no different. We have Dr. Chris in the house with us. Welcome, Dr. Chris from Indiana. We're so glad that you're here.
Good to be here.
It's great to have you here. Now, I know Dr. Chris a little bit. We're working together in the Les Brown, John Tallarico book anthology called The Greatness in You. And it has been so fun to work together there. And it is through that dynamic connection that I met this incredible person, Dr. Chris. And he has a story to share and incredible gold nuggets to drop today. So get out your pen, your paper, or I don't know, your tablet or whatever you're using to take notes, because you're going to want them, because we are going to make sure you're fully loaded to know how to choose what's best for you. So Dr. Chris, do us all a favor and tell us, who are you?
All right. Well, currently, I work as a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and I have 17 years of clinical experience. So we are what we call an evidence-informed practice. And one of the things I learned as I was pursuing my doctorate is that just because there is a published study does not mean it's always the best course of action. So what evidence-informed means is that we're very up to date on what are the latest research, but then we also pay attention to what really works in the clinic. We are adamant about the body has design. It was beautifully and wonderfully made. And so when we work, we always try to honor the body when we use medicine. So that is who I am.
Wow, I love that. You said body. Did you say body has a design? Could you repeat?
We try to honor the design of the body.
Honor.
And so, I'm sorry. What I really mean by that is often, this is kind of jumping right in here, but sometimes I just have to do this.
Yeah.
When we decide any condition, whether it's inflammation, blood pressure, anxiety, some people struggle with mood disorders. We don't want to bypass design and force the body, into another direction, because when we do that, we cause other problems. That's often why you'll hear that list of all the side effects from whatever treatment, because we're not honoring design. And so there is a way to be persuasive, but also to be gentle and to not interfere with our purpose and design as we were given.
That is really powerful. And you've been mastering this for 17 years.
17 years. I didn't pursue it originally because I was convicted about it. What happened was I found myself in the middle of my own health crisis. And I always tell people, I don't believe that God made me sick, but it ended up being the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Sure.
And he used it. He used it in my life. And now through my journey to get well, I'm able to minister to others everything that I learned. And then, of course, I went on to gather a lot of very specific medical knowledge. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I love how you turn that around, how you kind of flip that and say, God didn't do this to me, but he used it and for good, which is scriptural, right? He turns all things around for good for those that love him. And that's so true, because I'm a firm believer that God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. And with that thought in mind, then no matter what comes down the pike of our life, into the boxing ring of life, life, we can whip it with God. We can whip it, but it's having the strategies and the understanding. And like you were talking about, the design and knowing how to navigate in that landscape that you're in and come out victorious. So here you're kind of mixing faith, which is beautiful, with coming out of your own stuff, which brought you to a crossroads, it sounds like.
Yes.
And so you went in search of truth, in search of, and in this case, in search of truth when it came to the body and healing and health and wholeness. And now it's what you are, it's what your life is, it's your purpose now.
Yes.
And you're being used greatly to, my goodness, to bring all kinds of people into a health and wholeness trek of life on purpose. So tell us a little bit more about your clinic. You mentioned that briefly, what you've been doing, and how does what you do impact others in making a choice to be healthy and whole?
All right. Okay, it's great. Our clinic is based on traditional Chinese medicine principles, and we'll talk about what that means and what that looks like. But I'm formerly, before I became ill and then had to create, my own journey back to wellness, I was a commercial aircraft mechanic. So what you get is you get the mind of someone who is very scientific and mechanical and mathematical, combined with a form of natural medicine that is new to most of us on this continent, but has a long, long history, far older than our current medical, system that we're familiar with. So because I'm also a believer, when I was in school for this, it just started to be like, wow, because you see it more and more. Everything was made with purpose. So I'll give you and part of the training for traditional Chinese medicine, if you choose to become, like me, a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, what that means is that you study internal medicine and you do 4 years of herb pharmacology training. So you learn how to treat everything with herbs, just the same way that a medical doctor would learn how to choose with a traditional medication.
Wow.
And so if you take something as simple as, say, a dandelion, and this is why you just, when you was in school, you just got on fire. Dandelions have over 50 medicinal purposes. And so what happens is when we're in our yard, okay, we see those pesky things, and some of us use chemicals or some of us use natural things, but we try to get rid of them, but they keep coming up. Now, this is part of listening, is what I call listening, because God is always speaking to us in different forms, but sometimes we have to quiet ourselves, and then we'll hear the voice of God. Well, dandelions, I feel, speak to us every day because we try to get rid of them and they continue to offer themselves, and they're very difficult to eliminate. That's by design. That's with purpose. It's part of the theme of today's, discussion. Okay. And so this is in the mind of a Chinese doctor all the time. We're thinking, when I drive, I see it. And it's so amazing. Things that grow there's a plant called yournewnormal. It's a thorny, edgy plant. You just looking at it practically can scratch you and make you bleed. All right. And then you find out what is its purpose. And its purpose is that it is used to invigorate the blood and to enhance circulation. And then if you would go, say, to a shady side of a tree, and there's plants that are very delicate and they're shiny, maybe fuzzy, and then they have a moistening properties, and they can rehydrate organs, important organs like the brain and the eyeballs. And so this is where you just can't not see God in everything. It was all made with us in mind. The entire world is a pharmacy made for his creation. And so that would convict everyone of the responsibility and the stewardship of how should we handle the ecosystem. I believe in responsible use of what was made for our provision. But when you understand that all of it has potential medicinal purposes, then you're like, wow, we really better take care of this world because it was made for our provision.
Right.
And I can go on. That's just an example,
Yeah, no, keep going. This is so good. I knew that dandelions had some medicinal purposes because I drink roasted dandelion tea,
Mhm.
right? Tastes a lot like coffee actually, but I didn't know there was 50. Oh my gosh! And I will interject one thing that I wrote down here, that you said that the whole world, that there's so much that was made. Pharmacy was made for his creation.
Absolutely.
That's really powerful. And you went to school for this and learned all about this. This isn't something that you just sort of randomly picked up. You went and studied this like a traditional medical doctor would go study all of
Correct.
that other stuff. Go in the flow of what's on your heart, but I would love it if you would touch on what was that like to go to school for that? You don't hear about that.
No, you don't. And so here's where it gets really interesting is that although the Chinese, system and their belief system is not the same as, if someone has a faith-based system like a Christian faith, they do recognize design. And so they're always looking at nature and they're trying to think about what is nature telling us and how do we learn from nature and how do we honor nature, especially as it relates to medicine. And so that part, it just was like all I had to do then was just add what my understanding and then it just magnified. All right.
Mm.
So for example, like in the Taoist tradition, they have what they call the great mystery. That's part of their faith. But we know the great mystery by name. And so all it does is just 10 times or 100 times everything that you're learning in school.
Yes.
Right. So when you're in school and you're learning things, okay, here's another example. We hear about meridians and a lot of this stuff is mystery, to us. But meridians are basically pathways that are like nerves and blood vessels that are traveling through the body. So the Chinese methodically mapped out all of these pathways. So think of it like longitude and latitude. All right. Like we understand this with the globe. So then the language becomes more accessible to us. So if in our training over the course of 4 years, we're also learning every pathway in the body, nerves and vessels. So if I put an acupuncture point, let's say, and nobody try this at home, right? If I put an acupuncture point, say somewhere on the hand in this area, this affects the large intestine. So it can be used to regulate digestion or elimination, but then we're like taught. So I have my library just like a medical doctor. This is for deviation of the face and mouth. This is for stiffness of the neck. So it just starts coming out of the library. So when a patient comes in, if I happen to see the mouth pulling, maybe they had a Bell's palsy, then I start going through my library of this point travels this pathway, just like longitude and latitude on a globe. And when combined with another point, it will allow the nervous system to re-intersect or connect and allow that system to self-regulate. And so when you hear that, now you think that happened by chance? Not a chance in the world that happened by chance. So what has happened is another layer of God has revealed himself. We're always thinking, everybody thinks they found the answer. We're going to send a satellite to Mars. Suddenly we're going to have an understanding of the entire universe. We don't need God anymore. It's ridiculous because every time we think we understand it all, one more layer gets peeled back and we find that we don't know anything,
Right.
And yeah.
Right.
So
Oh my gosh. That
that's
is
what it's
so
like.
powerful, Dr. Chris. Like this is some serious stuff. So our bodies basically, from the medical training that you've had, our bodies are mapped out.
100%. 100% mapped out.
That is so cool. And yet God says that he, counts the hairs on our head, right? That we were knit together. Think about that. We're fearfully and wonderfully made. As you were saying that, I'm thinking, wow, that brings it to a whole nother level. If our bodies can be mapped out, that someone can look at Bell's palsy and be able to look at the map of the body and know what needs to happen to make a connection. You've talked about making connections a couple of times. What does that mean to make that connection?
So It's almost like in our own interactions and relationships, you've heard probably that it's what I said, what you think I said, what you heard, what you think you heard. So there begins to be this breakdown of communication, right? We know what we intended, but it doesn't always get delivered, especially like say text or email. What the tone can be misread. All right,
Mm-hmm.
and so. Also, part of our training is nutrition, and when I want to guess, we're going to go to this principle. Think of the body as an environment, just like an ecosystem, because it is. All right, and so if foods can disrupt the communication, all right. So let's say, for example, so we use terms like dampness, phlegm, dryness, heat, all these terms. And this is what we're looking at. Which organ system or where in the body is something like that, almost like a beaver dam. So if you have an accumulation of phlegm, then, and this could be cholesterol, this could be anything, then that's going to disrupt communication. And then behind that, almost like a beaver dam, you're going to then get an excess buildup in another system. So now you actually have two systems that are problematic. And so part of the diagnostic training is trying to identify which systems, one system may be overloaded, one system may be too weak to do its job. How do we sometimes facilitate moving things from one area to another? Or sometimes we have to purge, and so we may use herbs in combination, with a treatment. So it's a lot of it's multi-layered. It isn't just like automatically just point A and point B, but the herbs are the same way, and sometimes they're used in combination. And what's even more powerful, I want to tell you this, is that in children, you don't even have to use needles. You can use acupressure simply by stimulating the point. Their bodies are so young and they're developing, they just almost immediately go like, thank you. And it just wants to self-correct. And it's just like amazing. I've worked with children as young as 2 weeks, and children that were jaundiced, children that were that were having trouble, like their nervous system wasn't developed. They're having trouble remembering to breathe, which should be an automatic function. Down syndrome child that was going to be put on a trach, that had they had to feed them in a feeding tube, and then they were going to put a trach because of breathing. And just the thought of this child that was under 2, whose life was already going to be so challenging, and I was like, I can't let this happen. I can't let this happen. So I talked to the parents and I said, could we use a formula in the feeding tube, and then I teach you acupressure. And if you would do that, and this is the thing, when we do natural, there's a mistake a lot of people makes. You have to treat it the same way as traditional medicine. So if you're prescribed do something twice a day or 3 times a day, you can't skip it or you're not going to get the result. Because sometimes people all of a sudden think natural means miraculous, and it's not. It's still, we're working with the body. So I have to tell you about this little boy, and then we can go to something else. But the parents worked with the child for 3 months. They used the herbs in the feeding tube. And one of the things that I got was the fontanelle on the child was not closed, but he was almost 2. And we are taught something what we call the 5 delays. And the 5 delays mean that somewhere in his system didn't have the strength to complete maturation. So what I added to his feeding tube was herbs that would help him fully develop. 3 months later, they did the sleep apnea test. He was cleared. When the parents brought him back to my office, there was this mature-looking 2-year-old boy who still was going to have a very challenging life with Down syndrome. But you know what? He's not going to have a trach. And that's because of the herbs that God put on this earth and that I was fortunate enough to be educated in and know how to use to help this child. That's living on purpose. That's health and wholeness on purpose by design.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. So what was it like with the parents? Were they hesitant at all, or were they ready to jump right in? What was that like with them?
Everybody, regardless of whether they're adult or they're with a child, there's always hesitancy because this is so new. Okay. And honestly, even to this day, even though this has been so much a part of my life, when people bring in children, I'm always humbled because that's a big trust.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you're a traditionally trained pediatrician or you're someone like me, every child that's brought in should be treated with 10 times care, because wow, what an amazing opportunity, but what a tremendous responsibility. As a parent myself, thinking of being in a situation where you're so concerned for your child and you're looking for resources, I'm thinking, wow, they're offering me their trust with their child. I mean, that's where you go in the office and you grab the file and you pray and you go, God, I'm going to do everything I can, but please fill in every blank for me. And if and I don't think I missed the mark, but if I missed the mark, you just do the whole thing. You can take the credit. All I care about is the outcome, the outcome. And so, but this family was very receptive. And really the big thing was, are you willing to do the work and are you going to follow through? And they did, and they reaped the reward. Not only that, but here's another beauty of this thing with pediatrics is that, can you imagine that if twice daily, any parent right now in our society spent a half an hour with their child, hands-on, nourishing them, we would be living in a different world right now, even without any words being exchanged. And so, wow.
Wow. I can connect with you on this. We have two children that were born very preemie and had a lot of special needs early on in life. And you're right, there is a bond that comes that is unique in its calling when you, as that parent, are in a place where you need to take that time. Now, all parents should want to take that time. I get it. But there is a special, unique bonding. It's not better than what you might have with another child, but it is definitely different. And my daughter, we did brushing. I remember that, and that had to do with all this neurological stuff. And many doctors wanted to do all these tests and all this stuff. Dr. Chris, and I'm not opposed to any of that. But then a physical therapist said, "Have you tried brushing?" And I was like, "What? Brushing?" But that was a very special time for my daughter and I to have that time together. And we definitely saw major change in her ability to process, because with her, it was processing challenges, and the processing challenges began to just fade away when we implemented this. So I can't imagine what it would have been like if we had known you at that time and had been able to work with you. So tell us a little bit more about, what does that look like or sound like for that person that's saying, gee, maybe I should step outside the proverbial, box here, and I should try something outside of regular medicine. I'm not getting any results, whether that is cholesterol, or maybe it's sciatica, or maybe it's, I don't know, there's so many things, stiffness in the joints, whatever these things are that people are dealing with. How do they navigate through that to get to somebody like you? And how do they know that they're with the right person? Because, you could, I suppose, work with people all over the world, but it's going to be pretty difficult to do acupuncture, acupressure on them personally if they're like in Florida and you're in Indiana. So for those people on that search, what would you suggest to them?
Okay, that's an excellent question, because this is also this is one of the most requested forms of medicine now. They say about 20% of people are asking their insurance companies and other things.
Really?
And so everybody's trying to jump on board, and it's important because not everybody has the same training. So other professions, and if your scope of practice allows you to add something on, then that's acceptable. But there are other professions where they only have to do 100 hours of training or a few hundred hours of training, as opposed to 5+ years. And there's a big difference then in the outcome. If we just focused on that, because you're basing it on available knowledge, and you're not going to have the same knowledge in 100 hours of training as you are in 5 years.
True.
So for someone with my background, there is a board. I'm board certified in 2 forms of Chinese medicine. And that board, if anybody wanted to look for that in their own area, it's called the NCCAOM. And we can add that, I guess, to our links, the nccom.org. And that's a national board for people who are traditionally trained in Chinese medicine formally. And that would be your best place to find a resource, someone like me in your own community. That way there's a standard. We want to make sure we have some type of a national board standard. And now I will say this, and maybe this isn't important to everyone, but for a lot of people, especially I live in the Midwest, a lot of people had religious concerns. And so there may be practitioners that aren't believers. And so you'll have to decide if that's a deciding factor to you. I just happen to be, and it's a great fit for me in my community. But I always tell people too, because when I first started, people would come in and they would be like, I don't know if this is going to be violate my beliefs. And I would say, okay, do you know where your medical doctor attends church? Do you know if he's a heavy drinker? Do you know if he treats his children and his wife properly? Because if you don't, you need to apply that standard to everybody equally. And so, but I definitely would say, if you're someone who wants to see faith integrated into medicine, I know of no better medicine. If you can find a practitioner who is both, it's going to be so compatible with what you believe. And then if you do find yourself, and there are times when our bodies are broken and we need other forms of medicine, you'll know then that when you get there, it's because you did everything you could do with your body in a natural way. And then it's time for you to take the next step. And then you can be at peace with it.
That is so powerful. There's so many people that we have both talked to, run into, spoke to, right, that have ended up in a medical situation that they're wondering if they made the right decision. And it's in a traditional medicine. Like, should I start taking this medication now? Do I really want to do that? Am I making the right decision by having this surgery done at this time? Any of those kind of things, or even when it comes to a medication taking for depression or anything like that. And I'm not against any of that, because I've seen it help so many. But what you're saying is there's another way. You don't have to go over into the traditional medicine if you don't want to right away. You could go over here, and you're not just saying drink some wheatgrass. There's actually a layout in your body being mapped out to be able to show somebody that's educated like you what needs to be done to bring wholeness and health and healing to your body God's way in the earth. Absolutely. That is so powerful, Dr. Well, take us on a little journey. I mean, I just want you to be able to free flow and share from your heart. What are some things that you think, or that you're prepared to share, that you think we should know?
Sure. So I let me share a minute of my own journey there, because I want to show you how well this overlaps. So I said I was working as a commercial aircraft mechanic. I moved to Indiana, so I started hobby farming. I developed symptoms that no one could figure out what was going on. And this is not an uncommon story. This is why I'm sharing it. And so I had no training in natural medicine of any form. So I was completely dependent on the professionals, right? And so my condition progressed. It got to the point where I wasn't able to continue to work on airplanes. I had knee pain. I agreed to a knee surgery because they showed me on an MRI that they thought what I had was cartilage tear. So I did the surgery, and then I got worse. Well, what happened was I actually had Lyme disease, and this just happened to be part of my story. But everybody has other unidentified, chronic debilitating diseases. But when they did the knee surgery, what that does, that allowed it to travel systemically throughout my body, because the incision was made, and then that introduced it to the rest of the body.
The rest of you, yeah.
But we just still didn't know what I had. And so, but then I got progressively worse, where I wasn't able to work or provide for my family. And I did do conventional medicine. I did antibiotics, but that wasn't effective. So because I worked for the airline, I got to fly wherever I wanted. Not everybody had that luxury. I traveled to New York, where Lyme is prevalent. Saw a Lyme specialist. They did a scan of my brain. They said that it was completely, all the vascular system of my brain was at risk of just not recovering. And so they put me on intravenous antibiotics. So I did intravenous antibiotics, and eventually they said, you're clear of Lyme. The problem was I still had debilitating arthritis, what they call arthralgia, fibromyalgia, potentially autoimmune diseases like Sjogren's. My tear ducts were eaten up. There's soft tissue in there. I couldn't produce a tear. I went to the ophthalmologist. They did the test, and after a half an hour, not produce one tear. I didn't believe them. I went home. I diced up 10 pounds of onions, sniffed in that thing. I couldn't produce one tear. And I thought, wow, I'm in serious trouble. And so that was, and then I talked to all the specialists, and they're like, well, 20% of people, they just have to learn to live with the pain, train for a new career. And that was where I was left with as a father and a husband. And I'm thinking, my life's not done. I got a family. I've got this whole life ahead of me, and I'm not looking to check out, and I just can't accept this. So that's what launched me on this path. And so I just want to be clear about that. This wasn't something like I grew up with. This was me. The doctor said, we're done. We did everything we can do. And I mean, I was not anywhere capable of going back to work. So then you start doing your own research, just like a lot of parents do if they have child with special medical needs and other things that they need. And so that's what put me on this path. I found someone, they helped me, started to see there was potential in recovery. They moved, and I was left without that person. So I started taking classes, and then those classes, it was like, and then the airline went bankrupt. Okay, so here's one of these things. I'm slow, but I'm not that slow. So it was like, now possibly God may have had a hand in that one, because that door closed. Okay. And it was like, I don't have the airline. Well, I had enough seniority. I could have chased a bankrupt airline around the country, or I could choose to continue that path of getting that education. And it was a no-brainer. I'm like, this helped me. I'm passionate about it now. I believe in it. If I pursue this, I'll have a new career, and it's a wonderful career where I can make a difference in other people's lives. So I just wanted to share that because, this wasn't like my life's purpose that I knew of. Maybe it was written in my story, but it was a story that I wasn't aware of yet. And because of that, that's part of what I wanted to say, is that the best, worst thing that ever happened to me, I'm so glad that I discovered this. And I'm so grateful for all the lives and the people that I've met and the people that I've been able to help, and how appreciative some people are and how much they've touched my own life. And so if anybody's listening and they're on a health struggle, this idea of purpose, health, and wholeness, just know that even though life can be challenging, you may be getting set up for a comeback, and something bigger and better could be on the other side.
Yes. Oh my gosh. What a testimony. You are a living example of that. So you were pretty much, I mean, okay, when was this? Because you've been practicing this now for 17 years.
Yeah.
So you said you were a dad. So I'm assuming you have kids at home then. You were in the middle, good career. So you had your career going. So like, when was this that you were going through all of that?
Yeah, it was around 2000. Around the year, yeah.
Okay.
And it was 2005 when I started by going to school for acupressure. And then that introduction kind of piqued my interest because they introduced us to the idea of herbal medicine, and then just progressed. But, to just even give you an example, I remember calling the acupressure school and finding out, how long do I have to stand in class? Because I could not stationary stand for any length of time. And I didn't know if I could complete the program. I just knew that I wanted to be able to do something, start providing for my family again. And, it's a scary time. You got a young child. My son was 4, and we had moved to Indiana so that we could have a more of an ideal scenario, because I had a great job that my wife could be home during my son's early years. And then that kind of got taken from us because we were, wow, I think you're going to have to go back to work. It's not what we planned, but like, we got to pay the bills, and now I got to figure something out. But I started looking at, is there something I can be doing while I'm home? And so that's really how it all started. I know you had asked me a question, and I kind of went off on a little bit on a tangent with that. But
great, Dr. Chris. This is beautiful. Keep going.
Okay. So let's go to when I was trying to get my diagnosis for a minute, because there's some really big lessons in here I think everybody can benefit from. And I know not everybody that's listening is trying to recover from a chronic illness, but if you have this knowledge and you're ever in a health challenge, you're trying to help a loved one, this is going to be powerful, powerful stuff. So first thing I want I want to share with everybody is that the doctors work for you. You hire them and you can fire them. And somehow that's been all turned around, and we're all messed up in our mind because of this hierarchy. They have a job. Their job, their salary comes from people like us. And then it's not about how big or how knowledgeable or how high they are. Don't accept it for any minute. If a doctor is arrogant, just get out, period. You will find a better doctor. A humble doctor is going to treat you better than an arrogant doctor, even if they have a little bit less experience and knowledge. I'm telling you straight out. And so, because if you're not going to listen to the patient, proper diagnosis, treatment begins with proper diagnosis. And listening is a very important skill. Sometimes it requires humility. Sometimes people don't just get right to the information. You got to listen to a lot of story. And sometimes the story is part of the healing. But I definitely want people to remember that. And then this principle, please, this ties in with both. Here's another thing we overlook. As we've all cut our finger and we've seen it heal. Yes. It's called human self-healing capability. It is a gift from God. That doesn't mean we can heal from everything, but we overlook the most. God put this in front of us so we never forget. We cut, we heal. We cut, we heal. You can do it 100,000 times and it's going to happen every single time. And that is there to help remind us. It's there because we were designed to heal, but it's there to remind us that we have human self-healing capability. And anybody makes you doubt that, run. It's the same thing. Just get out. You need a doctor that understands the body can heal. Then they can use their knowledge to help you with getting every possible thing in line to take advantage of, because technology is also God-given from human intellect. So we don't want to ignore that we have great, amazing processes now, but we need to bring it all together. And so, human self-healing capability is definitely a principle that I want to make sure was talked about today, because it's part of the theme of this show. It's purpose, it's design. It's there. It's part of each and every one of us. It was gifted to us. We have it. We can tax it by not doing the right things with our own health and the way we treat our bodies. Even emotions can be very taxing to our health and our healing. So that is another aspect of this.
This is so good, and I'm getting a lot out of it. So can you tell us what exactly is the difference of acupuncture and acupressure? Because there might be people listening and watching right now and that are going Chinese medicine, acupressure, what is, by definition, what are they, and when do you use them? Like, that's three different things going on. So how do you choose what to use?
Sure. So the points, the locations, when we talked about longitude and latitude, they're the same. They're the same points. All right. A trained doctor using an acupuncture point is using the same point that's done with acupressure, but we can be very precision, because there are even techniques where the direction of the needle, the depth of the needle, the size of the needle, there are many things that we can do that can influence how much influence, how much messaging are we putting there. All right. Acupressure was an earlier form, I believe, of the therapy. And, but it's also excellent for self-help. And so that's where I can give that to patients as homework, whether they be adult patients or whether I give that to parents so they can use with their children. And that's nice. It doesn't require special medical training. There isn't any worries or fears related to an invasive procedure. That's much obviously should be done under the supervision of somebody that's trained. So the beauty of acupressure, though, is you don't have to be as accurate. Okay. If you're doing acupressure, you can use a broader brush stroke and you're going to get the job done, because when we're doing the needle, we have to be very accurate in order to get that same influence.
Oh, okay. That's good clarity for people to know that, because you see the big signs, even, at the mall, come here for and they'll show like the foot and all the different things on the foot and says, come here and do this, and understanding why there's two different ones and what the difference is. So really that acupuncture that sounds to me like that's the cream on top. That's really what a person wants. And that the acupressure is going to be a supplement. Am I following you?
Yes, and you know, like I'll have I'm pretty accessible, you know, to my patients. So sometimes someone may be, say, on vacation, something comes up, and then I can actually send them through the, you know, the business phone. I can send them a picture, a diagram, and say, if you use this point, it could help you if you're having nausea, or maybe they ate something and they're having to go to the restroom too much, and then it can help them to get that under control so that it doesn't ruin their vacation. So it's very portable. That's one of the things that's beautiful about it. When we're talking about wholeness and purpose and by design, really, shouldn't everybody, you know, have access to some level of their own healthcare and understanding of their body and how it works and being able to regulate it, you know, within reason to some
Yeah.
level? I believe that they should, and that and it is accessible to everyone. It's not, you don't have to go to school for 5 or 7 years to be able to benefit from the medicine.
True. So for the person watching today that's saying, where do I start? I know I need some help. Where do they start? What do they do?
It's a great question. There are definitely some good. I mean, there's different degrees of technicality in books. There's some great books that are available, and I'd be happy to you know, send you a couple of suggestions where we can make that available to readers. There are some acupressure self-help programs. I ended up doing one here for all of our patients, and it's something that we do have a library now. So if someone comes in, I'm like, you know what, I have a set of points that you can use for that. And then and that's been great, because we'll just like send you to your phone and be like, hey, if you happen to come in for stiff neck, then I send you some points that you can use, or, you know, whatever it happens to be. We did put that together as a library, and if we could talk about that at some point, but if there was an interest in that, we could look at, could we make that available on a broader scope, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. All those things are just jewels, Dr. Chris, that people don't know is out there, and unless somebody like yourself stands up and says it's here, right?
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, what else would you like to share with us today? This has been so good. We're learning a lot. What else is on your
Yeah.
heart?
Okay. You know, we talked a little bit about some action steps. All right. And I did try to put a few things together that I thought would be helpful. So this is, you're going to learn a little Chinese medicine, but I'm going to give you some things that you can begin using right at home if you're watching, that may help you prevent, you know, stay healthy, try to prevent illness. One of them is a very specific principle that's used in Chinese medicine, and it's follow the seasons. This is very foreign to us now. Follow the seasons means many things. It means follow the seasons with your foods. It means follow the seasons with your activity levels and your sleep. So I'll give you an example. Once we had artificial lighting and we started working 9 to 5, nobody really has an awareness anymore of seasons, like what they should be doing with their sleep cycle, or their eating. And then we have designated holidays. So on those holidays in our society, typically we just overindulge on schedule. Okay.
Mhm.
But the Chinese don't think that way. The Chinese are very in tune with, if a food is seasonal, it should be eaten during that season. And this is also part of where the artificial lighting, electricity has changed that, because now we have refrigeration, freezer capability.
Sure.
So I'm here in Indiana. We don't grow tropical fruit, but I can go get pineapple in the middle of winter. I can get ice cream in the middle of winter. Is that the wisest choice? We haven't been trained to ask these questions in Western culture, where it's almost like at birthright in Chinese, where they just know this growing up. So what that means, one of these things I want to leave everybody with, the following the seasons, is that if it's in the middle of winter, it's probably not the best time to get a cup of iced tea with your meal, because then you're going to go back out to your cold car, and you've also like frozen your digestive system when you put food in there, and you're asking your digestive system to do work. And this is very counterproductive. Following the seasons with sleep is, when the sun rises early, that's a better time of year to get up early. When the sun goes down early, that's a better time of year to go to rest early. But we follow our system, you know, be up at 5 and we'll work by 8. And, you know, we have no awareness of the seasons. And so same thing with things like sweating. People might, after Christmas, they might start their New Year's resolution, get in the gym, get on the treadmill for an hour and a half, and they're sweating, right? But this is a time of, if we look at nature like the Chinese do, if you're at a seasonal place like Indiana, the leaves fall off the trees, everything goes dormant and goes to the root. It's consolidating, it's hibernating, and it's waiting for its new birth in the spring. So, but what we do is we go to the gym and then we sweat for an hour and a half in the middle of winter. And this actually can be based on an environmental understanding of the body. This can be using resources that were meant to be conserved, even potentially being used by our body to do regeneration during the winter, and we're expending them.
Wow.
This is not necessarily the right time of year to be doing that type of activity. So when I say action steps, and I say number one principle to try to remember is to follow the seasons. We're talking about foods, we're talking about sleep cycles, and we're talking about the types of activities. And I know that's going to be new and profound. It's going to require people to kind of like take that in and think about it. But I would just challenge you, as you go through some time now, ask yourself like, this is starting to be interesting. Am I doing the right things at the right time? And often we'll find that we're not. And that's a very easy, free principle. You don't have to go to the pharmacy. You don't have to come for treatment, that you can immediately apply in your life. So can I share a few more?
Please do. Yes.
All right. So the next action step is breath work. Okay. Now, what do we know? What do we know brought man to life? The breath of God was breathed into the nostrils of man, and we were given life. Breath is the beginning of life, and breath is the end of life. There is no life without breath. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of systems out there, and people are like, oh, there's yoga and there's all this. I don't know what I think about it. I want to get involved. That's okay. But you need to know this. Breathing, okay, definitely is in the Bible. Okay. And and so when I was doing the one of the assignments for the doctorate, I did this calculation, and I may be off a little bit, but we all breathe about 25,000 breath cycles per day. Okay, just now, most of us do not breathe. I'm just going to stay on it for a second. Most of us do not breathe below the diaphragm. We don't use the area. Based on my calculations, when we do, it's the equivalent of taking an extra 5,000 breath cycles per day. All right.
5,000?
5,000. Right. Because we're using the lower third of the lung. All right. Now, when we talk about using the diaphragm, here's some things I discovered. This is a long way around to give you this principle, but I want to really drive it home why breathing is so important. If you have the opportunity to be around a young child, like under a year old, lying on their back, watch them breathe. You'll see that they breathe from the abdomen. Watch the average adult, and you'll see that they breathe from the chest.
Yeah.
The reason we breathe from the chest is because we're thinking. But breathing is not something we're supposed to think about. It's supposed to happen automatically.
Yes.
Right? But as adults, we become smart, so we start thinking. All right. And then this is what I discovered. And this is why it's so powerful. I started working with a lot of children that had ADD and ADHD, and sometimes they're having behavioral problems in classrooms, and things like medications were being suggested. If I could get that child in my office and I get them on the table and I watch them breathe, first thing you'll find out, they're breathing from the chest like an adult. So then you retrain them to use their diaphragm. They go back to school, and in my office, we start getting letters from the teachers saying, we don't know what happened, but the behavioral problem has solved itself without medications. And all I did was teach a child to breathe. Okay. So, I mean, this is like, what are we doing? We've forgotten the root, the basics. The breath of life is fundamental to our health, but it can even affect attention span in our children. All right. And so this is, I thought about these kind of mindfully. I really wanted to give you some good stuff. And, when we have anxiety, if we stop and we ask, we'll go, oh, I'm taking short breaths, or I'm not breathing well.
Shallow.
So this is even for adults, where we can start to go, I might be able to moderate some of my negative emotions simply by regulating my breathing. It's very powerful. It's very true. And again, the life begins and ends with the breath. I don't know how to say it any other way. So when I say an action step, and I say follow the seasons, and I say breath work, I'm saying this is powerful medicine.
Join us next week for part 2 with Dr. Chris as he continues to talk with Dr. Pamela about wholeness and health on purpose.
This is Dr. Chris Leininger from Pure Health Acupuncture. We have over 17 years of clinical experience solving medical mysteries and treating chronic debilitating diseases. When you've run out of options, your options at our clinic begin. Pure Health Acupuncture, we make things work again. Bring our clinic to your doorstep with the same topical remedies we use during therapy. Contact our office for further details at 812-691-5100. You can also visit us on the web at purehealthacupuncture.com. Pure Health Acupuncture is a comprehensive Chinese medicine clinic. Our services include personalized herbal remedies tailored to each patient's specific health needs. Our herbal remedies are made from all natural plant-based medicinals, which we like to refer to as the maker's medicine. Unable to travel? Feel free to schedule a comprehensive consultation conducted from the comfort of your own home via Zoom. Simply contact our office at 812-691-5100. You can also visit us on the web at purehealthacupuncture.com.
We've all been through it. You know, those times in life where we just want to give up, we want to give in, where we just don't believe in ourselves anymore. You remember that mountain that looked impossible to climb, but you did it anyway? Do you remember that race that you didn't think you could finish and you ended up on top? But see, you listen to the voice inside of you. The one that encourages you, inspires you, and drives you to do things that you didn't think you were capable of. Listen to the voice. It says one phrase that will ignite a flame in you that will set the world on fire. Can you hear it? Listen.
You have something special. You have greatness within you.
Les Brown and John Tellerico present The Greatness in You. This book anthology is changing lives around the world. The magic of the human spirit is highlighted by these timeless stories of men and women who are inspiring others to discover their own greatness. A collective of talented authors has been assembled for this project. NFL Hall of Famer Brian Dawkins, influencer and entrepreneur Alicia Little, Deputy Governor of the British Virgin Islands David Archer Jr., and world-renowned actor Sam Humphrey. Through their commitment, dedication, and determination, you'll learn how you can overcome any challenge, move into your highest potential, and embrace the miracles of life. You will hear 30 empowering stories led by the world's greatest motivational speaker of our time, the legendary Les Brown. His voice has inspired millions around the globe to find their greatness. And now he's unleashing the next generation of motivators and thought leaders who will inspire the masses. So if you're ready to find the greatness in you, order your copy today.
Calling all coaches. Join Dr. Pamela and doctoral candidate Deborah Allen and their new anthology, Coach Doctors, bringing their specialty to the table. They're signing authors right now. There are very few spots available. Get in contact with Dr. Pamela now through social media or email her at hello@purposewithpamela.com for more information.